Hey there guys, and welcome back to episode 2 of San Francisco, and in this episode we get heaps done, and I guess the most noticeable thing will be what you're looking at right now. We put all of these buildings in, and some of these are actual buildings from downtown San Francisco, which is pretty cool. There was 3 or 4 of them on the workshop, so I grabbed those, and thankfully they're the most noticeable buildings in the skyline as well. And the rest of them are just made up of just pretty generic American style buildings, lots of stone, brick and tile, and I've also got crafty with PO and tried to create a couple more of my own skyscrapers as well. So it's definitely not perfect, but it's given off some pretty cool vibes. So the first thing I have to do is try and establish a grid pattern, and obviously I'm going to stick true to how San Francisco is, and thankfully it's really quite simple in terms of the grid pattern. The downtown grid pattern is following the same angle as the Bay Bridge, or thereabouts, and then it transitions to a slightly different grid pattern that heads over to the west coast. We're not going to be putting all of that in this episode. We're just going to focus on getting this downtown layout and maybe just creeping out into the suburbs slightly. I also want to make sure I extend the road network over to an industrial area on the waterfront. We're going to visit that this episode as well and put in a couple of services, and I've decided to detail those services as we go so I don't have to come back to them. And I'm also making sure to put some tram networks in here as well. Obviously, a lot of these roads have tram networks on them as well. So again, it's not exactly like San Francisco, but I am using Google Earth as closely as I can to get these tram roads in the right spot. And a fair few hours later, it looks something like this. And I also spend a fair bit of time off camera just getting these inclines right, because some of them are really steep. But that was quite boring, so yeah, I decided to do that off camera. So that's pretty much it for the basic grid pattern for the downtown and surrounding area, although I know that I will modify this as we go and build in the series. So I mentioned earlier that I got some American style buildings off the Steam Workshop, and here you'll just see me put a dummy road in and place most of them down. And this is a little technique that I learned off watching other people's series. They'll put all of their buildings down so they can get a good look at the size and shape and style, and then place them in their downtown to suit. And some of these buildings are just really beautiful. Unfortunately, I couldn't find enough from just San Francisco, so I've branched out to most of America. Some of these are from a Chicago pack, a lot of them are from a New York pack, but they all follow that similar brick and tile style architecture. And like I mentioned earlier, thankfully the most recognizable buildings in the downtown area here were on the workshop, so those are sort of going to give off an immediate familiarity with the skyline, hopefully. And the rest of these buildings will sort of just mix their way in, and I've even included a few vanilla buildings as well. So just as I was ready to drag these over to the downtown, I realized that I didn't actually have all of the access points for the road set up, so it was probably wise to get that sorted first, so we'll jump over and do that now. Some of these rows have required a little bit of jiggling as we've gone, and the map does get modified here slightly because the height map was not scaled right from the start, so it's not really a big problem. It just means that I have to sort of shift this a little bit to fit downtown in, and a couple of these hills by downtown have scaled in too large by the looks of it and looking at Google Earth, so I'll muck around with that for a little bit and then start putting in some of these connections to the highways. And the first connection I put in is, I guess, the main one into downtown, and it comes into the Salesforce Park area. I think that's what it's called. And once I've got that one in place and I'm pretty happy with it, I flip around and finish the little wee skinny one lane exit that comes in underneath the Bay Bridge, and that's going to come into one of the main intersections on just a bit of a 45-degree angle. And that pretty much concludes our on and off ramps for this very middle part of downtown. So next you'll see me mess around with the terrain a little bit, and this is the very end of when I was doing it because it took quite a while and I just put a little bit more of the grid pattern in here in a couple of places, and you'll see me modify this later on anyways. It didn't even really matter. But next we move over towards the Golden Gate Bridge and start putting in the intersection there with the highway. And this is the first intersection in the city that's really just come from my head. I'm not following any blueprint or anything whatsoever. I'm just sort of plumbing this in here, and you'll notice as well that I've got sort of the end of the tram line here as well that's going to double back on itself. So this might end up being a little bit of a hub in here. And I've kept it quite simple for now, but something gives me the feeling I'll be modifying this in future. So I get all of the line markings in and the node controller work done at the same time so that it looks somewhat presentable, even though I think I'm going to modify it. And while I was out here doing this road, I thought there's another little bit of nature detailing that I can put in here that's going to stay in for the rest of the episode, and it's on a cliff on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I thought, well, while I'm here I'm going to whip over and detail that as well. Even though I really like the cliff texture that I've got with Theme Mixer, it doesn't really look like the type of cliff that I was going for here. So I jumped on the Steam Workshop and tried to find some cliff props and buildings and things like that, and I had some luck, and you'll see me try some different things here, different techniques as well. But the basic gist of it is I'm trying to make some of the top of the cliff really steep looking, and underneath that, directly underneath that, you'll see more rocks and stuff down where it meets the water, so it sort of looks like the cliff's falling away. And I also include a little wee beach where the cliff meets the water, and then of course heaps of grass and heaps of little wee like bushy scrub that you would find right on the coast. So after I deal with that little wee detour, we can head back and carry on with the roads. And this is the second intersection that's come from my imagination, and I don't know what you would call this, but I'm really pleased with it. It looks compact, it looks neat, and it should work quite well hopefully. And this is going in to service the industrial area. And we need to get this in now because we are going to be moving on to some of the services that we need in the city. So this will be used pretty well straight away. So again, I'm using the node controller and the markings as we go along, just so that these are all done. I don't plan on modifying this intersection, so hopefully this one stays as it is. So once these are done, I'm all ready to go back and put these buildings in. So once I put the buildings in, I'm going to rely on the services because I am still trying to play this game as well, and that's when I'll switch over and put those services in with all of these roads already in place, ready to go. So the idea with placing these buildings down was to start with the most iconic ones, or the ones that were actual buildings from San Francisco in the workshop, which is the Transamerica building, the 555 California building I think is what it's called, and the Salesforce Tower. I could just imagine being slaughtered in the comments section for not having these in the right place, and they're not perfect. You've heard me say that before, but I'm really happy with how these go down. They fit into the grid quite well, considering the grid was never built specifically for these buildings, and then the rest of the buildings just get placed in and around these. And there is a couple of other iconic buildings that I try and replicate as well, and some of them I've used POs, so they're dummy buildings, but I'll use cube services later to put some life back into them. Next we zoom in a little bit closer and start putting in some of the smaller buildings, and from my observations there's pockets of these really small like low commercial buildings in amongst all of the skyscrapers, and I'm using a combination of American style low commercial and also just some vanilla buildings, and I turned some of them into procedural objects as well so that I can fill in the back part of the grid. I don't really want to have too much space down here. Looking on Google Earth, these are relatively compact with just buildings. It's never been my favourite part of City Skylines putting waste services in, but it's such an essential service to the city that we've got to put it in at some stage. We might as well put it in and detail it while we're going. And I've decided to put it out here on this sort of peninsula, and uncannily it's exactly where it is in real life, which was a complete fluke. I did not plan this whatsoever, so a really happy coincidence. And even though it's in the same location as real life, I'm not copying it like for like. Because these are actual services we're using in the city, I'm not worried about making this look like anything in particular. And I'm also including a coal power plant here. And this is going to work till either A, I come up with a better idea, or B, somebody tells me it's inappropriate. But yeah, it'll do for now. So the detailing around here is very simple. I use Ronix's dock pack and some surface networks and very simple detailing here. So there's a few trucks and a couple of props on the waterfront, but that's about it. I'd be sure to chuck a car park in here as well for any employees, and I make one little part look a bit rougher with some rocks and stuff like that. And I've only stuck to the immediate area surrounding the waste facility here. I don't want to get too carried away for now. And next we come down the coast towards the city a little bit more, and we're putting in a water station. So I've got a large pumping station here from the steam workshop that we're using as our primary piece of equipment, and then just surrounded it with other sort of waste and water treatment stuff that you would see, I guess. Hey man, I just drink it, but this is about as close as what I would imagine this would look like. And again, we've kept it fairly simple really. Although this one here is slightly rougher than the last waste management area that you see me build. We include like a really scruffy looking area on one end of it with a really cool cliff texture prop that I found. And once we've got this all built, that's two of our pretty essential services all done, ready to roll. So next I want to do a residential area of the city, just a primary part of it so that I can get some people in the city to get it sort of started. And I've chosen this little wee valley here in between these two hills just on the northern part of the city, and we're going to fill up this valley with some low commercial on some of the roads and mostly residential buildings. And I got a couple of packs off the workshop. I got some New England style buildings and some Art Deco style buildings, and there's one or two packs in particular by Seabud and Prez that are just knockouts. They're awesome. You'll see me use a lot of those here, and I'm also making sure to use just small buildings. From Google Earth, there's no large buildings in this area. They're all really small, so this took a long time to do, but once I had these in position I could move on to doing the Coit Tower, and I hope I've pronounced that right. I'm going to sound like an idiot if I haven't, but this is really cool, this monument. It sits right on top of a hill here in a really prominent area of San Francisco, and I was really excited to build this. It's got a really cool road that winds up and around the hill to this sort of roundabout at the top, but the part I really love is all of the bush around it, and there's also some really big cliffs that give an awesome contrast to all the unique architecture in the area. So I carefully make my way around the hill, placing down trees, and I'm being sure to make sure every one of these is placed in the right spot. I know this is going to be such a viewed part of the area when it's all done. In fact, it may end up being one of the most viewed parts of the city, so I really want to get this right. And one of the parts that I was most happy with was the cliff. I made a cliff out of a prop that you seen me use earlier in the episode, and I'm just so stoked with how it's come out. It looks so realistic. I just can't wait to hear what you guys think of that, and if you want a link to the prop, just let me know in the comments and I'll find one. So as we make our way along the cliff edge back towards downtown, we run into this area where the houses spill down the side of the hill a little bit more than they do in other areas, and most of them are these sort of new style apartments. So I've tried to put them down here, which was quite difficult because of the incline obviously, and I've had to turn some of them into PO because the terrain was just pulling around and doing some crazy things. And some of these buildings are even vanilla because they just looked appropriate. They looked modern and contemporary and lots of glass, and that's what we see on the side of this hill in real life. So once I've got all of these in a place, I can carry on with my nature detailing and the cliffs on the rest of it. I've got a couple of shots here comparing to Google Earth so that we can see and reference what we've built in this episode. I hope you guys enjoy these. But that indeed brings us to the end of episode 2. So as usual, I hope you guys have enjoyed that. If you don't subscribe, you should subscribe to me, or at least consider it. And please give the video a thumbs up. If you can do those two things, or you've already done them, you're a bloody legend. I will see you guys on the next one. Look after yourselves. See ya.